economies of countries, but also the whole world. So it's a very interesting topic that we have chosen today. Um, it has always been, food has been a part of the human journey, human species journey. So right from the time the hunter-gatherers were there, we use fire to cook food that helped in the evolution of the species itself. And then we came to the stage of farming, which led to urban settlements and cultures and societies. And today it's all interconnected. So it's a very interesting and wonderful topic to discuss. And I'm sure your panelists will, they're all experts and they'll highlight various specific issues. I perhaps will be very general and try to see aspects I can think of when we think of food. I understand that IKEA in India offers vegetarian balls as part of their menu. We with Dheeraj here have been sort of serving Indian-style skogan. So there's all mixing of cuisines, fusion, flavors, which is possible today. People know about each other. In Stockholm and Sweden, we have, in the last 10 years or so, the Indian diaspora has probably grown 3 times. These are all IT professionals and other researchers, etc. Similarly, the number of Swedish companies in India has grown and keeps growing. So there's much more mutual understanding of not only about each other's countries, but also cuisines, and that's a good thing. When we think of food, and we can talk at different levels. So food, for example, evokes memories of our time spent with families and in our homes, or at feasts in terms of weddings or other festivals. It also tells us stories, for example, of deep time, but also recent decades or centuries and millennia. These stories of migrations, how people move and how it influences the cuisines of other countries or other regions. So these are many different stories stories of also conquest or of trade in the past centuries. So that's another thought that comes to mind. If we look at today, the conflict in any part of the world has an influence on, let's say, the food prices or the availability of grains or stability of supply chains. So all that also becomes involved, and no part of the world is separate from each other in terms of even the availability of food in the modern world. My previous station was Mauritius, where the Indians were taken as indentured workers to work on sugar plantations. So when we talk about food as basic thing as a sugar or banana or things like that, what comes to mind is also how these were part of the plantation economy when the recent globalization was taking place. So these are some of the things that come to mind. If we see globally, the population of the globe has doubled in the last 5 decades. So how can the various agriculture systems cope up to manage the supplies for this total population going? In India, when we got independent, there was a huge food scarcity for the structural problems that were there in the colonial context. But then very soon, because of scientific interventions, we were able to have a green revolution. And today, India is a food exporter. So that's another aspect that we can talk about. Then there is the question of how in the world today malnutrition and obesity both coexist. So that again reveals structural problems, and how, for example, seeds or many other inputs can be concentrated in a very few companies globally. That's another issue. Then agriculture subsidies, the huge agriculture subsidies, especially in the developed world, are also an issue which gets discussed at global levels, and what is the implication for the global economy in that. If we come to more micro level, food tells us about the diversity of cuisines and which actually depend on the soils and climates and other availability of other resources at a particular place. We forget that the inputs and then the cuisine that we have today has many influences. For example, in India, often it is not widely appreciated that simple things like potatoes or tomatoes were not there, let's say, a few hundred years ago, and then they reached India quite recently. There are a lot of innovations going on in terms of how the packaging or preservation came about around 80 to 100 years ago, whether it was for armed forces or for space travel. Many of those inventions were now are commonplace to use the daily food processing industry. Fast food chains came up in the last few decades, and you even have a Big Mac index by the Economist magazine, which sort of tells you how to compare currencies globally. So again, it tells how connected the whole economy is. We can buy, for example, especially in the developed economies, anything from across the world in the supermarkets. And now increasingly there is also thought coming up as to how is this model sustainable? That you can have crops grown in parts of the world which are completely water dependent, but there is not enough water in those locations. Is this, even to get those things across to various locations, is it sustainable? And how can it be improved? So those lifestyle choices, etc., are coming up, and then one of the themes in your talk today is sustainability. So that's very important. The younger generation today, I think, understands very clearly about the impact of their lifestyle on the environment, on carbon emissions, and so on. And there's a growing consumer acceptance, especially in Sweden, about the more sustainable products and processes. In recent years, the digital transformation and the logistics transformation is also leading to a lot of innovative startups, and this is reaching across remote regions. So that again is an aspect very interesting, which has also economic and job implications. Many new startup trends we see. Precision fermentation, for example, or special proteins, lab-grown meat, and so on, direct-to-consumer delivery chains, cloud kitchens. So all these are wonderful sort of innovations taking place across countries, including in India and Sweden. And these also offer possibilities of collaboration, partnerships among various businesses. I think there are a lot to discuss on this aspect, including in a business and technology sense. So thank you for arranging this, and it's a very interesting field. I'm looking forward to hearing from all the experts.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and it's such a great pleasure to have the support of the embassy when we are doing this event here. We are at Indian Street Food here in Stockholm, right in the, you can say the heart of Stockholm. It's a beautiful sunny day, and it's a very important topic. How and what we're going to do with food for now and in the future. So we will sort of digress away from maybe the bigger questions when it comes to policy making or when it comes to issues connected with climate change or biodiversity loss. We will go a little bit narrower today and focus a little bit on culture and look at history and culture and try and unravel some of these questions, which are very complex, of course. But thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, hi everyone. My name is Sanju Malhotra. I am one of the founders for India Unlimited, which has been working to connect Sweden and India in different ways, through a big culture festival we do every year called Namaste Stockholm, and through our India-Sweden Innovation Day, which brings together actors in the world of business to discuss how we can work together closely. So we're trying to connect India and Sweden in different ways, and of course, people-to-people connections is very, very important for us. I also run a platform called Tasting India Symposium, which the idea was to raise the issues connected with the food and food systems and food culture, both from our history to the future of food. And I also work with WWF, and I run a global sustainable consumption and diets platform where we address maybe the bigger questions on policy and how it can be top-down approach. But today we're going to do more a bottom-up approach. And the other thing I've also been doing in Sweden is teaching people how to cook Indian food. So I've taught maybe 2,500 Swedes how to cook Indian, and also like vegetarian cooking classes and meat-free Monday cooking classes, and also something for children called Playing with Food, where we were working with Jungle Book characters and so on. Anyway, so now I would like to invite our panelists. A really warm welcome. Per, Mathias, Dheeraj, please come here. And we have two of our panelists online. I'm hoping that's going to work. My first panelist is Ruth. Please do come closer so the camera covers you. And Ruth D'Souza Prabhu is she's an independent journalist who's been writing a lot about food, and actually food and sustainability. She's based in Bangalore. And across these 20 years, she's written for, among others, New York Times and Al Jazeera. And I would say that she's written for every top publication in India. Ruth, in fact, was recently also in Sweden. And currently, she's doing something really interesting. She's documenting the food of her own Mangalorean Catholic community, and I think that's very interesting because India is so big, and you know, every 50 kilometers to 100 kilometers the culture changes, and food is really like our identity. So which means that even the food changes based on who we are, where we come from, which religion do we belong to. So these are all aspects about both the complexity and the beautiful diversity that India brings to the table. Ruth, do you hear me?
Yes, Sanju, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. It's great when technology works. Okay, great. So, Ruth, you visited Sweden a few years back, and you wrote about sustainable food. What was your take-backs that, you know, what did you take back from Sweden?
Yeah, that was an absolutely wonderful trip, Sanju. Honestly, it was the last trip I did before the pandemic hit. So what I found truly amazing about the culinary experiences in Sweden was how it is so rooted in the local geography and the nature of the place. Sustainable procurement in Sweden is not talked about in the past tense. It's very much a part of the present. From the fact that you have exclusive reindeer husbandry by the Sami community to the harvesting of Calais Lerom, all of these practices ensure sustainability, and it's very ingrained into the culinary culture of Sweden. Similarly, I feel India too has a long history of sustainable procurement, eating seasonal, local. Every child knows here when the mango season is, when the colocasia leaf season is, when to go picking mushrooms. It's all ingrained in all of us. Commercialization, mechanization of agriculture may have put us off a little bit from the sustainable path. But there's currently this huge movement to going back to eating cleaner, healthier, and it's all catching up with us again. In terms of the take back from Sweden, like you said earlier in your introduction, considering the vastness of India and the immense number of culinary cultures we have within the country, I would say encouraging documentation of age-old practices, ensuring their relevancy and easy implementation, that would be something we need to take from Sweden because it is a part of the culture, and I think we need to encourage that a little bit more in India. Very similar to Sweden's protected designation of origin state, we have geographical indications tagged or produced from different regions, and there are several attempts all across the country to bring in these extant food making cultures. Like, for example, we have something for the Bandel cheese right now. This is from Bengal, and there is just one family left that makes this cheese. But there is a movement now to try and, proliferate it, make more people aware of it. So I think we need to encourage such setups. And in a country as vast as India and as diverse, it has to be done from a very local level.
Right, and I think another thing about Sweden which is so interesting is the children, they learn about what grows from a very young age. They are really introduced to learn about food in different ways. Everybody forages, so they appreciate nature in a very different way. So that I think is really, really interesting, and I wish some of those ideas and principles can also come to India. But you wrote this fantastic article in Al Jazeera about how Indian food has influenced the global plate or the palate. Did you see anything about healthy and sustainable parts of that cuisine being represented, or is it just chicken tikka masala?
Okay, thankfully it's not just chicken tikka masala. What I actually saw when researching this article is that a lot of Indian practices, especially in terms of frugality and using what you have, that was something that kind of went to these other countries. So if you look at, say for example, the Portuguese cana de galinha, that is a chicken and rice soup, which is essentially the rice gruel of India, which every one of us across communities, it's something that we're very familiar with. It's something that's had when you're unwell, and it's something that's proliferated, and it's something that you can make with what's easily available on hand. So I think frugality and being able to use what you have on hand easily is something that has India has given to the rest of the world, whether you look at it from the kedgeree point of view from Britain, from the mulligatawny soup, from the French vadawan, the choka of UP and Bihar. All of these have gone to the rest of the world, and it has proliferated the idea of sticking to your roots, using what's on hand and making the best of it. What I see globally also happening is a lot of fermentation is coming into food practices. That's something that's being used a lot. A switch to healthier alternatives like millets. I'm sure Meghna will speak a lot about that. Locally grown vegetables, and also this attention to where you get your meat, your poultry, your fish, all of that. There's a lot of attention being paid to it, and it's not just in a particular section of society, but generally all across.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. I have one more question for you before I move on to the other speakers, and I'll come back to you a little bit later down the line. So you're doing all this work with the Mangalorean Catholic community, and of course, Mangalore is quite close to Udupi, which has been known and connected with the idlis and dosas, and this is kind of fermented foods that is very popular both in India and around the world. And my question to you is, in your research of the Mangalorean Catholic community, have you found any treasures that are interesting that, when we kind of look at the past to see, is this could be an answer for our future when it comes to healthy and sustainable meals?
So what I've noticed about the Mangalorean Catholic cuisine, and this is something that kind of goes from the past into the present in terms of practices, is that everyone, as far as possible, will try to grow what they eat on a regular basis. So a lot of Mangalorean Catholic homes today are these large houses with individual compounds that give you a lot of space to grow what you have. If you don't have a house of your own, there's always a family member who has this huge property and will ensure that they grow everything and they give it to you. So I see that there is a huge comeback to using produce from your own garden. And honestly, that never really left the Mangalorean Catholic community. I know my mother would look down on me if I had to buy curry leaves from somewhere or the bird's eye chili from somewhere. She always makes sure I have a ready stock of it. So I wouldn't really say the past defines the future. I would say we could take cues from the past adapt it to our current lifestyles, make it more relevant. And that's when we can, bridge the gap between the past and the present. Our lifestyles are very different from what the previous generation was.
Thank you. I think that was really interesting, and I'm hoping that this will come out in a book or in some other kind of documentation, and we would love to show this in Sweden at that point of time. Ruth, we'll just get back to you. Here, well, we have also such a distinguished panel. I'll start with you, Per Styregård. Per is a very well-known food journalist here in Sweden. I would say you are a wine specialist, and you write that for Dagens Industri. But you also are writing for Econ magazine, and you're the chairman of the jury for the White Guide, which is a very important guide here for showcasing the best restaurants in not only Sweden, I think it's the Nordics or probably Europe, I guess. And also you run this innovation program on 100% circular, and you're also contributing writer for the Kurt Bergfors Food Planet Prize, which has to do with food and sustainability. So you have a great background with this. So Per, I mean, with all your experience and your, let's say, recent trip to India, or recent trips, you've been to India sometimes, and do you see anything that you feel has been like that stands out from this visit? I mean, can India play a role to nudge people towards a more healthy and sustainable diet?
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and listen to you all. I think that the answer is yes, absolutely, to that question. And I did this trip also, one of the last ones before the pandemic, and it was so incredibly inspiring, and I'm longing back all the time to learn more from this immense number of food cultures, I'd say, that you have in India. And I think that there are so many ways that we could learn, and so many ways that Indian food culture can contribute to nudging us towards a better, a more healthy and a way to eat that is more healthy and good for the planet. And I'd say that one of the things that I experienced the most during this trip was the way that we, particularly as Swedes, can learn from your usage of pulses and lentils and legumes and peas and it's we're not that good at using these produce for main dishes in Sweden. We're learning, but our starting point is way behind you. And India has an immense number of ways of dishes, of iconic dishes that we could learn from. I think that's a very important, and as we now in Sweden and in the Nordic countries are starting to find and to cultivate indigenous varieties of this, that's a very, very exciting meeting combination. It's going on, and it's going. It should go even faster. I think that's an important way that we could learn from India, and that could be nudging us and many other people too towards a more healthy way of eating. Also, it's just a mind that's just thinking of. It's hard to define vegetarian, of course, but if we say we have about 1 million people in Sweden, we have about 400 million in India. Just the idea of so many people eating so many diverse cuisines, primarily vegetarian, it's a source of inspiration. All the possibility that gives us, it's amazing.
I think it's interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit. I want to connect Sweden and India through food in different ways. And so, I mean, historically, I don't know if the audience here or online knows, but spices is not something new in Sweden, as you might know. I mean, the cardamom came to Sweden about 1,000 years back. It was the Vikings who brought it here via the Venetian trade route. Coriander is not a new herb. It was actually there in the Middle Ages, but it was more used for medicinal purposes when there was this Catholic cloisters, so it has been growing in the ground in Sweden. So many of these herbs and spices have been around, and of course pepper came, much earlier on, and so on. So I think one of the arts of Indian cuisine is how to use herbs and spices in innovative ways that gives us this plethora of cuisine. So that could be one area of like a food lab or a collaboration where we could do things together. Anyway, I think that could be a bright spot of looking forward. You also in your visit to India, I mean, you stayed in a yoga Ayurvedic resort. I was wondering, did you see something there that's kind of interesting? I mean, today when you go walk out in Stockholm, everybody's having these turmeric shots, you know. I mean, okay, it's come from California, to be honest, but it's Indian Ayurvedic tradition. But here you go out in the street and instead of coffee, people are having turmeric shots. So that's an interesting concept or trend that sort of you see, you know. So do you see like there could be other such things coming in yeah, anything that you would like to add to that?
Well, from the stay at the retreat is in general something I was aware of even before, but there you see a very practical example of how food is a part of your well-being, body and mind, and also bringing in cooking classes with Millets, for instance, something that I got to learn a little better while staying there. That was an amazing experience of the holistic view of how I feel in my body and connecting to what I eat. And I think we are in Sweden quite open to these ideas, but it's going more slowly, and we need to learn a lot. But we are another bright spot is that we are actually open for quite a few new ideas. So what's your experience with teaching all Swedes here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was quite interesting when I was, especially the vegetarian cooking classes. I mean, most of them were actually eating meat. And then we talked a lot about, you know, the flexitarian diet, which I think is a very much part of the Indian diet, where if you have meat, it's in the corner of your plate, and it's not there in every meal. So that's the kind of lifestyles I think a lot of Indians actually have. Although it's changing because of modern consumerism and rising purchasing power and you know, the middle class. So there is a trend, of course, which is going the wrong way, but then we have a tradition which I think is actually very sustainable and very climate friendly in terms of this flexitarian diet. So they wanted to see how they could learn more of that. They wanted to learn more about what you can do with vegetables in different ways, and I think experience that also. So there is much more to be done, and that's why it's great to have you here, Mathias and Per, and of course our speakers online, and you, Dheeraj, because you're all working also a lot with the consumers and, you know, with the consumer industry. Per, one last question, I mean, about women chefs, because that was something that you really focused on, and was there anything, do you see them to be the holders of the bearers of this changing food system? I mean, do we need a matriarchal society, which we do? I mean, that goes without saying, but you know, can that be, I mean, what is the role they're going to play?
I think it's hard for me to say anything in general about female chefs in India. However, some of these female chefs that I interviewed taught me a very interesting things. And connecting to what Mr. Ambassador said, one of the most greatest takeaways for me was I learned from Asma Khan, for instance, who is there is a cobweb of culture being learned and be possible to be learned from the food, from the dish. The dish could be, it could actually come from India, it could travel to Malaysia, it could die in India and disappear, and it could revive, it could stay in Malaysia. It could. There also another chef we met, Anahita Dondi, who is from Parsi culture, Iranians coming to India and merging and a combined culture where you could actually come there and see food as a guidebook and a history book and a culture, a book in learning in cultures that's quite amazing and quite rich and also very exciting. It's like reading a book and understanding migration being a very important part here, and how that could actually be a super positive thing in society. It's quite. Of course, we do that we have that in the Nordic countries as well, but it's so much more dense and so much more wide and so much more information in there in all the different Indian food cultures. That's very exciting takeaway for me.
Thank you, Per. I'd now like to introduce Mathias. Mathias is extremely well known in Sweden. You started the Vego magazine in 2014, which I think itself shows that you were in the forefront. And it's become Sweden's biggest vegetarian, vegan food magazine. You've published 14 cookbooks, you run a TV show. Your latest being, of course, this book called Green India, which I have a copy here. There. And it's co-authored with your partner Aman, who's from India. So that's you, Mathias. But before I ask you some questions, I wanted to say that since we're talking about veganism and all, I don't know if you know about the history, because in India, about 2,500 years ago, two religions started. It was the Jainism, which maybe a lot of you in Sweden might not know, but you know about Buddha, and so you know Buddhism. Anyway, these were the two religions that actually talked about something called ahimsa, or non-violence against living things. And then that's how this whole culture of vegetarianism actually came in. And then, you know, we see that there's a revival of that now in the world, because there are now children in Sweden who will not want to, do not want to kill and eat. And I think that's really part of the whole vegan movement. And also that you see that the similar thinking has come in, but I don't know if this is a new religion or it's a new culture, but it is what it is. So what made you choose this vegan path, and you know, and did India inspire you in any way?
Well, no, India didn't inspire me. Sorry. No, I became vegan 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I was a heavy meat eater, and then I suddenly got a conscious.
Okay.
So I began with like a meat-free Monday. And got kind of surprised by how good it tasted, and also it's you get very detached from your food. I guess in Sweden, I think Swedes in general are very detached. Like they don't really know where it comes from, what consequences it has. So it was like an awakening for me, and I didn't have a plan to become vegan, but that's what happened.
Okay, and we talked a little bit in the break before, or even yesterday a little bit. So in Sweden, there is Indian food has come in different ways. So in the 1930s, there was something called the curry hons, and you know, I mean, all the Swedes here and your grandmothers would have had the Sunday lunch, which always had a curry hons. So that is old chicken that was cooked in this curry sauce. Recipes probably came from England, but it became a Sunday tradition, you know, so that was then, and I think that's interesting. But now in this modern age, I mean, how do we create new sustainable traditions? Can you imagine creating a dish for your Sunday lunch, which you know, all the families in Sweden will cook for their families? I mean, can we find a way to change tradition? That is, of course, one question. And how do we go there? You know.
Well, first, Swedes have to go back and start cooking with their families and eating with their families, because we've stopped doing that. And that's one big problem that I have, especially with a magazine and cookbooks. It's that people tend to they see cooking as a must. And that's kind of boring. We don't have like that strong food culture. We don't really sit down as much with our family and eat. And I barely get invited to dinners from my friends. So that's that is an issue. What were the question?
Yeah. So I mean, my question was about how do we find ways to nudge people? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I started with the magazine, there were no recipes, especially like vegetarian and vegan recipes. There weren't a lot of them. Now people can't really complain about that. So I think for me, it's very hard to compete with meat. Like the status of meat is very hard to compete with, especially with food that is cheap, like lentils and beans. So I try to highlight all the other like good stuff, if it's health benefits or climate or environment. Because that's kind of a nice. I love Indian spices, but nothing beats like a good conscience to kind of flavor your food with. But that's the task that that's the hardest task for me now, because it's very hard, especially when people get more money. I mean, that's the same thing in India, right? People get more money and they want meat, But I also feel like going back to the whole, getting people to cook again and getting people to understand that it's not just a must. It's just not just food on the table. It's like a social thing. Like we don't really hang out with each other anymore. And food is a great,
connector.
Yeah, and also a great bridge between cultures and everything. It's. I mean, I'm so hooked on food. I love food. So, and it's sad that not everybody are as amazing as I am.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, Michael Pollan always said, that cooking itself is an art of preserving the planet. I mean, because it's one of the things we all need to do, and in fact, we need to do even more of it and not less. So, I think cookbooks and TV shows, and these are good ways to inspire people. So, with your book, which you have and Aman have written, I mean, on Indian vegan food, what has been the response? And are you preaching to the converted, or have you converted anyone? is the other question, because it's an important question to know, like, is it just vegans, or are there also others who are opening up to this idea? And how do you, that would be interesting to know.
Because the idea of the book came when Aman moved here, 2 years ago, and he was so shocked that the restaurants were kind of not, well, except Indian street food. That's his favorite restaurant. But also like in cookbooks and on websites and blogs, like the Indian recipes were not Indian to him, and he was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess we have to do something." People have been they love the book, but it's also kind of the first all vegetarian Indian cookbook.
Great.
In Swedish, So, and I guess people, even the ones who love Indian food, are not cooking as much as you might think. And a lot of people still think that everyday Indian cooking is simple. That's the whole thing. But people seem to believe that it's hard. So we try to change that. And also we still get emails from people saying, "Oh, there's more than one dal, there's more than none." So I think, our book is just a sliver of, all the Indian food out there. It would be impossible to.
I totally recognize this, because I've had people who come back for my cooking class, and I said, "But you've done this, but you've come back, so let me check." I try and find out what is this herb or spice called, and they're like, no, but it's so entertaining and all that. So they just come back for that. So I don't know if they learn, but okay, we try.
And one thing that is kind of also it kind of baffles our mind is the. Because we mainly focus on natural vegetarian Indian food, but nothing beats a vegetarian version of a butter chicken, and that's kind of like we want people to see that you can make more than.
But I have an issue there.
Yeah?
Why do you call it vegetarian butter chicken? Why is the word chicken in this?
Because that's what people want.
I know.
But it's we want people to kind of experience all the other.
I have such an issue with that, but that's a separate issue.
I've been vegan for so long. I even say meatballs and everything. So.
Vegetarian meatball. You still, I just think we have to, find ways to change the language. Because anyway, that's part of all of us and our work there. Yeah. And Dheeraj, I'm now coming to you. You're the founder of Indian Street Food, but you're a chef and an entrepreneur. It's a great combination that you can do this thing together. And you've tried to create modern Indian cuisine. You've taken it from the streets of India, so with Indian street food, and you also try to find ways to connect this with using some principles of sustainability in different ways in your food, in how you run your kitchen, and how you work with your staff, and in different ways. So I think that's really interesting. And also you now have this 4 restaurants, 1 cafe, 5 food trucks, and soon this amazing, cool, fancy restaurant in Oslo, just in front of the Opera House. That's huge in this just 8 years. It's amazing. It also shows the interest for if something is good and there's something authentic, then people really go for it, and I think that's been also missing, because we have more than 350 Indian restaurants in Sweden, but how much of it is, what is Indian, what is authentic, and this is also, I talk a lot with, I think with Ruth and my other colleagues and journalists in India, talking about what is authentic and what's not, and we don't really showcase the diversity of Indian cuisine. I mean, you put together this beautiful breakfast for us, which we will come back and look at before we end this session. So what's your philosophy, and how have you differentiated from these restaurants?
In 2014, when we started Indian street food, the idea was to integrate the Nordic culture and this Indian culture together. So we took the best of Nordics and the best of India, be true to the Indian tastes and palates. At the same time, the inspiration is very Nordic. Like the lamps you see here, it's like it's designed by a Swedish designer. The tables designed by young entrepreneurs and designers that have come up. At the same time, the menu also, if you look, we have a Västerbotten cheese naan, where we have taken the Västerbotten cheese from Sweden and put it up, into an Indian naan. So that has worked out very well. And we continue to do so as well when we go to Norway. We take their, brown cheese and put it into a naan. And do different kind of, stuff that we can do together.
No, that's interesting. And of course, I mean, as I said, so do you think, I mean, you have so many people coming here. I know you always give a choice at lunch between vegetarian and non-veg thali. And my question is, do people see beyond chicken tikka masala, or is that still the most popular dish?
See, we are here to cater to whatever our guests want to have. But at the same time, the food, if you look at the most selling dish that we have on the menu is the kathi roll, which we've inspired from India. So what we're doing, it's a great balance of carbs, the protein and the salad. So we want them to taste the authentic Indian food, but at the same time, it's also healthy.
Yeah, it's upgraded.
So it's upgraded. So you have a great balance of the carbs, the protein, and the salad.
And what are the trends you see when you said that about this? This is one of the trends that you're seeing, that people are trying new dishes and they're not stuck in the past in that sense. And I think also how you do the thali, you probably add more, like you add a salad. I mean, you do different things and different types of. And so in your new plans and what you are making, what is the role of sustainability here? And I know that you've also been very inclusive when it comes to the LGBTQ community, and you've reached out to them in different ways, and you've also ensured that you have make it a more inclusive work culture, and also you've differentiated, I think, from other Indian restaurants by offering much better standards of work conditions and all, than compared to, let's say, what is otherwise maybe not great standards. So I think there are some ways to, there's also social sustainability. It's not only about food, there are other ways. So tell us a little bit more about that.
See, the whole idea of Indian street food is that the whole world is a family. So we have to treat everyone equally here. So we helping each other, out. Also, one of the goals which we indirectly start in this mean of time, like I've learned this from childhood, the SDG 2 goal of the UN. We're trying to actually do it indirectly. There are homeless people in Stockholm. We're talking about Stockholm, Sweden. So we serve them food, meals on every Saturday. So that zero hunger thing, indirectly we're trying to cover up. When it comes to sustainability, we are working with zero waste. We have, incredible menu which is based on zero waste. We are sorting out everything. The food waste is, separately, which is left over is very, segregated in a great way. Also the packaging. People are talking about packaging now. We had this earlier. From 2014, we've been trying to find ways which actually exist in India. You have plates which are made of leaves that we're trying to bring in. So we've introduced that, and that has worked very well. So on the whole, indirectly, we're trying to do a lot of stuff that is sustainability. And if you look at the paint here in the restaurant, it's like, it's something which is very sustainable from 1920s that we bring in, And the tables, if you see, the cork on the tables is left from the wine bottles. So we try to use that. So the whole story is the best of the two worlds when it comes to India, Nordics, and Sweden.
I think it's very important with this packaging, because the pandemic was like things went back because everybody started ordering so much home, and then you get all this so much packaging with your food. And I mean, I just think that was unfortunately not great for the whole food waste perspective and so on. But thank you so much, Dhira. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for hosting us. I will come back and see what you're doing in the kitchen. I know you made some fantastic breakfast, and we will talk a little bit about it. But I have one more speaker online. Thank you, Meghna. Are you still there? Is she there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. I know you're in Europe, you're in London. So Meghna is a founder of Slurp Farm and Wholesome Foods. She grew up in Bangalore. And you have, of course, a background. You got a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. You've done an MBA at Harvard. You worked at McKinsey when it comes to food and nutrition. And children's nutrition specifically. Meghna, you've been really passionate about children's nutrition and health, and of course, Millets is your mission, and that is something we see through the products and through these companies that you've started. But also interesting to know that she's an excellent sportswoman, has won over 400 gold medals in swimming, and is quite, is very interesting and a real force, woman power force, and I bow down to you for that. But Meghna, why Millets?
So, hi everybody. Wish we could have been there in person. I think Millets found us. All we did was both Shoravi and me set out to build a kids' food brand that, with products that were healthy and had no junk in them, especially refined wheat and rice and corn and things like that. And, as we sort of dug deeper into food and, what would make sense, millet just appeared as it's funny, right? The answers always lie in your grandmother's kitchen. And that's how we found them. And they answered the questions both in terms of nutrition, so both micro and macronutrients. And then later, we discovered, not only are they good for us, they're also good for the planet. So it sort of, over time has ticked so many boxes for us. And I think it's just made our passion to get this grain onto as many plates, both in India and the rest of the world as possible.
And, you come from, of course, Bangalore, and I would say that maybe Millets has also really been part of your food culture, or the traditional food culture you've grown up with. So maybe it's been easier for you to also relate or connect to it. But hey, I come from Punjab, and we have no millets, or I go to Bengal, and they don't know anything about millets. So I think that might be a more interesting challenge even in India, which I think will be something. So. So how do you encourage more people to eat more healthy, and how do you inspire them, and is Bollywood playing a role here?
So I think two things. One is, millets were grown in our country for tens of thousands of years. So this is not something that, Shoravi and Meghna found, right? No. Or invented. and they've been growing all over the country. There's so many variants. It's just that wheat and rice have overrun everything else that we're eating. And we're not saying don't eat that. All we're saying is add some diversity into your diet, right? So the message isn't as scary as replace, as it's more like, add make that a more interesting plate. How is Bollywood playing a role? In India, there are a couple of things that have godlike status. Bollywood and cricket are two of them. We just brought on board a brand ambassador, Anushka Sharma, who is sort of an A-list Bollywood actress, who lives the life, right? So she, eats millets in her own diet, feeds her kids that our products, and more importantly, more broadly, it's part of her, of the way she lives. And, I think these days of social media, where people are seeing that up front. So it's not a celebrity just holding, holding a product and saying, eat this. It's in her life. And that's what's really exciting to us. It's very new. We just, took the campaign live a couple of weeks ago, not even a month ago. and we're already seeing sort of traction. I'm happy to share the link to the ad.
Okay.
It's Hindi though, but yes, I think it's certainly touched a nerve with most mothers who are trying to feed their kids healthy every day.
I think that's fantastic, and I mean, we need this, and we were talking a little bit about nudging, that maybe we need different influencers in society to help people sort of change their behavior. And so millets, the food of the poor, now has become the superfood of the rich. I think that's itself quite interesting. But can traditional foods like millets be an answer to the current food crisis? I mean, why are we so wheat dependent when millets can grow so easily, doesn't require so much water? I mean, so that's a question, of course, for the world food systems, and how do we develop a more resilient food system in the future? And how do we ensure that the poor, which was their food, now that if this becomes the superfood of the rich, will they still have access to millets? Because maybe, it's no more in their bracket to make it, I mean, maybe it becomes too expensive for them. I just think that there's a contradiction here. So what do you think of that?
So I think firstly, our products are certainly not, just for the rich. They are not, wildly expensive or anything like that. We work with these grains, which are definitely more expensive than wheat and rice, mostly because of subsidies and so on. But I think the problem that we have to solve is more one of aspiration, right? Which is moving the aspiration away from eating a very refined American product, which is more sort of, speaking to that American imagery, which has been so beautifully crafted, towards, very proudly eating an Indian-grown Indian product. That's also tasty and healthy and ticks all the boxes, both for the mother and the child. So I think that's the job for people like me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we talk about what is aspirational. I mean, Coke, people want to buy Coke in a village when they might not have access to clean drinking water. So that is a problem. It's a problem all around the world, not just in India. And I was just thinking, oats is something is very Nordic and has been here, but oats has become very popular in India. I mean, we have oats for breakfast in India for the last 20 years. I think we don't have millets for breakfast, but we have oats. And now we even get like things like masala oats and so on. So it's like there's so much innovation. It's amazing, and how things get adapted. In the same way, we would hope to see things get adapted, because everything has to be adapted for local taste and culture and so on. So it becomes like a story here, Meghna, I know that you are entering Europe and US and so on. So do you want to add something to that before I have a last question for all my speakers, because we're coming to the last 5 minutes of our session?
Yeah, no, I think, we're very excited to take millets to the rest of the world. We're launching a second brand focused on adults, which sort of meets both the protein and the fiber requirements, of people who are trying to eat healthy, very much, sort of vegan, gluten-free and so on, because that's what these grains are. They tick a whole bunch of boxes, and we just feel we want to do for millets in some ways what the Brazilians and the Bolivians did for quinoa, right? Which is to take these super grains to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Meghna. And now, ladies and gentlemen, just for my sort of final question. So, can we move the meat from the center of the plate to the side and downsize it? Because that's just one simple way of solving this. It's how the plate is designed. And I mean, there I really look at India, because that's been our method, and I just feel like this is the fight. Can we do that and add more biodiversity, because the power is in your plate, yeah? And it's really up to us from the consumers and so on. So here we have, the pen and the tongue, and we have all the chef. I mean, these are all the people who have the power to make. So, what is that one thing that you would like to do yourself? That is going to help bring this change.
Well, I want everybody to become vegans, but that's not going to happen. But I would love to, for people to kind of see as a plant-based food as something like a cuisine, like oh, a Monday I eat I don't know, Thai food, Tuesday Indian, Wednesday I eat plant-based, and it can be whatever. But like I want them to have it like to be a part of their everyday kind of food schedule.
That sounds great. But I wanted to I wanted to also go to the kitchen and see what Dheeraj has prepared, because he's made this fantastic breakfast. And is there a camera that will follow me now? So I will just give me a moment and I will just be back. So great. Dheeraj, what do we have here? We don't have too much time, so can you quickly,
Yes.
he's making, can you see that? So he's making this thing with millets. It's like a typical breakfast item. You're doing a millet poha, right?
Yes, a millet poha.
And that's from Maharashtra. And here you've done like beautiful fruit salad or chaat, as you would like. And what is this?
And this is like a turmeric and turmeric apple and rescued apple.
I think you
and
need to
orange.
come around
Yes,
now.
I'll do
Yeah,
that,
okay. Thank you. And here we have like a mini dosa you have done, which is coming from the southern part of India.
Yeah.
And this is,
Makki ki roti and sarson ka saag.
which is very Punjabi, but
Yes,
it's
very
also like farmers' food that
Yeah.
suppose give us.
And this is
Chickpeas?
chickpeas and a kulcha, from
Okay.
North India. And then we have a mango and coconut salad with fresh milk
Wow.
and some berries here.
Okay, very innovative.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Thank you for taking such
Thank you
good
so
care
much.
for
That
us.
looks
And-
really delicious.
Yeah, I wish you were here, Meghna and Ruth. But Ruth, are you still online with us? Maybe not. Okay, Meghna, would you like to add?
I
to-
am.
You
I am
are
actually.
okay. Can you refer back to my question about what can you
What
do
would I like
as
to
a
do?
writer? Yeah.
So as a writer, what I really liked, and this happened during the pandemic, I think it acted as a catalyst. A lot of people went back to their roots and began documenting it and sharing it with everybody. Social media played a huge role. That's where I say we need to use technology and bring things from the past into the present. I would like, as a writer, to continue documenting these things, because a lot of this knowledge is with the previous generation. It's not with us right now. So I want that to continue on an accelerated scale. I think it's happening. And make sure that that information is shared with as many people as possible.
Wonderful. And Meghna, do you have something in this regard? I know you've already talked about what you're doing and so on,
Yeah.
but tell us.
I think for everybody, right, for all of us, just to eat more diversity, right, whether it's fruit, vegetable, we eat so few sort of types of vegetables, types of fruits, types of grains. So add more diversity to your plate, the rest of it will follow.
Fantastic. Per, or the last words?
I think Sweden does have a special position, since we serve so many public school meals per day. And that's, at some parts of Sweden, like Södertälje, that is actually being done. We're serving and getting used to a different kind of cuisine with a lot of lentils and pulses. So I think that is a very, very powerful way of working this into the culture from the very beginning.
And that's what is needed, because we learn, right? I mean, this is what are the traditions? At the end, families cook those 10 dishes and they just repeat it because it's easy and fast and quick and so on. So if it comes into our school meals, that's one entry point about changing culture. And I think Sweden is doing like this amazing stuff. I mean, also, when I first came here and I studied at Stockholm University, you'd always, in the lunch buffet, you'll get this huge salad. And I think that was I don't see that in many other places, but definitely in Sweden, you always get this huge salad to go with whatever meal you order. And I feel that's an interesting thing that maybe even Swedes don't think about, but it's actually a very healthy aspect of that. You actually do get a lot of diversity in your lunch meal, and it's all over the city. It's everywhere. I mean, it's in every place in Sweden, so it's kind of interesting. But there is one dish in Sweden which is the pea soup, where you get every Thursday. It comes from the army days when there was not enough food, so it comes from the story of frugality. And I think that's interesting. And you know, if that's maybe is one tradition, what can we add something more to these? Because these are the ways for us to change culture, right? You have to create that one tradition that people will follow. But you need one clever chef, or you need one clever person to do it, right? Who's going to be the one doing it?
Okay.
You?
Oh, okay.
I'd like to add that you need to also bring your children out to good restaurants. It's so happened that my soon 3-year-old son, this is his favorite.
So India is the way. Great. I know the audience is here and you've been very patient, but if you have a question, this is a good time, even if you're going to run over a few minutes. Yes, Kai.
I would like to ask Pat.
Yes.
What about the beverage?
I will ask you like this.
Oh, sorry. What about the beverage? What do you drink to the different sort of spices or no
In terms
spices?
of Indian influence?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, one thing lovely with my trip to India was that I did the really fast-growing wine tourism in India that you might not immediately think about when it comes to India, but wine production in India is growing, wine tourism is growing, that's an important part. But also India has a set of lovely beverages to a little more spicy food that we might not be used to in Sweden. We drink usually beer. If something is spicy in our food, we immediately go to beer. But there is a set of other beverages. So also when it comes to beverages, there are other things to be influenced by from Indian food culture, I'd say.
Okay.
Okay.
I still think it's very difficult.
Yeah, Kai said you still think it's very difficult to do the pairing.
Yes.
But Systembolaget has become really, really good, and I mean they are now really, no, but they are really able to do this thing. But I want to give you like an interesting history lesson here. The first pairing of Indian food was actually done by a Swedish king. So there was this one of India's oldest restaurants in London in the 1930s, and your Swedish king from that period, Gustav någonting, jag kommer inte ihåg. I mean, he was the first one to pair beer with. He used to have duck vindaloo, and that was really kind of interesting. That it was a Swede who did that first pairing. So when we enjoy a good beer with Indian food, and of course now we have so many other things. You have like mango lassi, and you have other drinks, of course, you can have, which are also non-alcoholic and all. But he was one of the first, so that gives you a historical context also that connects Sweden and India in an interesting way, which nobody would have known, I guess. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. I'll ask all our guests here to please continue enjoying the beautiful breakfast. And thank you, Ambassador, and the Embassy for doing this thing together. This is maybe one of our first talks, and I'm sure we can do a few more of this in the coming years to keep that conversation on and learn from each other, because the idea here was about how can we learn from each other and what are the things we can do better, and I'm sure that will open new avenues, and hopefully also then Business Sweden will then go and bring some new products to India, and maybe India will bring more products like Millets and Meghna's products to Sweden, and that can be another way to exchange ideas too. And more cookbooks from you, and more articles from you, and from you, Ruth. Thank you so much. And Dheeraj, we're looking forward to great cooking always, and to more of. We want to see millets in your menu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next year is International Year of Millet, so you have to do this year-long millet festival. No pressure. Thank you all. Namaste.